Hello! Today we're going to talk about present simple and we're going to learn how to construct the phrases properly. What is present simple? We use present simple to talk about things you do every day. This is important and we're going to discuss this in detail during this video. Things which are always true. And speaking in general, you have to keep in mind that we're talking about the big picture. Things that don't change in the short term. For example, I work at home. When we use this phrase, it means that, unless specified, I always work at home. And this is true. Let's take a look at the next example. They don't live here. This is a negative phrase, which is something that we will also elaborate on during this video. And finally, questions. Do you smoke? Alright? Don't, do. Essentially, when we use present simple, we're always using the verb to do. Okay? So right now, we're going to explain this in detail. For our first example, we're going to use the verb to work. Everybody works, right? And it goes like this. To speak in present simple, we use a subject, a pronoun in this case, and we use a verb. This is just part of the phrase. It's a complement, but this is the important part. Subject, verb, pronoun, names, okay? And then we have an action. It goes like this. I work here. You work here. For the third person, all we have to do is put an S at the end of the verb. He works here. She works here. And let's not forget the object pronoun, in this case subject of course, it. We can also say it works. The plurals will revert to the original form. We work here. They work here. Let's make another example. Let's use the verb to study. In this case, we're also going to use an S, but we're going to make a small adjustment. Then I use the verb, study here. You study here. He, we're going to use the verb stud, and we're going to change the ending for this. He studies here. So the pronunciation is the same, but the written form is a little bit different. Okay? She studies here, and when we go back to the plurals, they study here. One important thing, and you probably noticed this, you have to use a pronoun because the verb doesn't show the change of the subject. Unlike Spanish, it's mandatory to use a pronoun. Okay? Negative phrases. This is different from Spanish in a very significant way. It's not enough to say no. Okay? Well, no means no in English and in Spanish. But in this case, if I say something like I know work, this is wrong, okay? And the reason is because in English we use auxiliary verbs, particularly in this case, the verb to do. This is important, so please focus on this. Okay, I know work is not correct because it doesn't indicate who is not working. I know work could mean many things. I am not working or I don't work. So we need clarification. And that's why in English it's necessary to use the verb to do, and in this case combine with the word not. So we have two auxiliaries, do not, and from now on we're going to say don't, and does not, which is doesn't. Now, don't is going to be used in the first and second person and with the plurals. Doesn't is only for the third person singular. This has to do with the S we discussed before. Remember? Okay, we will explain it anyway. So, please bear in mind that we want to say no in present simple. We don't just say no, we say I don't. And if you have to say no, we say you don't. When we talk about people other than you and I, we say doesn't. Like he doesn't, she doesn't, it doesn't. For example, it doesn't work. Okay? We can use the verb to work to indicate that machines are not functioning properly. So, one more time. I don't, you don't, he doesn't, she doesn't, it doesn't, we don't, they don't. Let's do an example with the same verb we started before. To work. In this case, we want to say no. Remember that. I don't work here. This is a negative phrase, okay? Not I no work. That's wrong, okay? So it's necessary to use the auxiliary don't. Let's follow up. You don't work here. He doesn't work here. She doesn't work here. The reason why we're using doesn't is because of the S. In affirmative, we would say something like this. He works. Remember? But now, when we use the negative, we need to use doesn't to indicate that it's the third person singular. Okay? So this is connected. This is the reason why we say doesn't when we say he, she, or it. And following up, when we use the plurals, we and they, we use don't. So we revert to the original form. It goes like this. I don't work here. You don't work here. He doesn't work here. She doesn't work here. We don't work here. They don't work here. So remember, when making a negative phrase using third person singular, we have to use doesn't. We made a video before, so check it out, about word order in questions, and we reviewed this formula. Question word, auxiliary verb, subject, and infinitive. Check it out. It's going to do you good. Now, going back to present simple, if we want to ask a yes or no question, we simply start with the verb to do. For example, do you work here. Okay? Do is our auxiliary, you is the subject, work is the infinitive. So this is a yes or no question. Okay? Small note about pronunciation. If you ever go to England, do you is commonly pronounced as dear. Dear. So questions like this are going to sound something like this. Do you work here? Do you work here? So it's very fast. It's not always perceivable, the difference between do, you. So keep in mind that when traveling, do you usually sounds like dear. Okay? We start with the auxiliary verb, subject, and then we use the verb. In this case, we don't use s's here. If we were to ask the same question in third person, all we have to do is change do for does and the subject for he or she. So the question, does she work here, is correct. This is a common mistake, okay? Does she works? The S is here in the question, so we don't, I always have to do that, use it in the verb. Now, yes or no questions are very useful when we want a short answer. Does she work here? The answer is going to be, of course, yes or no. But when answering yes, there's no need to say, yes, she works here. It's a very long answer, isn't it? We have to say, yes, she does. Yes, she does. This is called a short answer. And the good thing about this is that just saying does is repeating the big idea contained in the question. So, does she work here? Can be answered with yes, she does. Or no, she doesn't. And then we don't need to repeat the phrase. Okay? So, yes, she does. No, she doesn't. Okay? So keep in mind that when saying yes in present simple, we can just use the verb to do to repeat the main idea contained in the question. When we say yes, and also when we say no. Okay, we're almost done. So let's recap a few things that we showed in this video. So, use present simple for things you do every day, every week, or every year. Things in general, remember, that's the key. Or things which are always true. We're speaking about the big picture here. And remember the spelling rules for the third person singular. Now this is important. I work here. She works here. So, when using the third person, in affirmative mode, remember to put an S after the verb. And when uttering a negative phrase, I don't work here, we have to use she doesn't work. Same thing goes with study. I study English. She studies English. Negative phrase, I don't study English. She doesn't study English. And last but not least, remember the word order in questions. Question word, auxiliary verb, subject, and then the infinitive. And the auxiliary verb for present simple is the verb to do. So, questions in present simple always contain the verb to do. For example, do you work here? Does he work here? Does she study English? And that's all we have for today. Okay, on behalf of everybody here at Smooth Talkers, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Bye.